If you think about two properties managed by two different real estate agencies with two different landlords, today there's a general belief that there's a market price for that property. They should be identical. They're identical properties, they should have the same price. I don't believe that's true for rental. For buying, I get because you've bought it and you now own it. But renting is a service. It's ongoing. So if I'm a renter and I were to know that that property manager is very responsive and that property manager is not very responsive, then I would pay more happily for the responsive property manager. And so the idea there's market rent, I'm not even sure I believe that idea that there's a market rent. There's a service being offered in the same way if I go to a W hotel versus a Holiday Inn, not that I'm a hotel expert, but I would expect, and someone might say, there's a bed's a bed. What's the market rent for a bed? So no, there's a service involved. And that's what I'd like to see. I've say sometimes internally, the day I give this up and retire is the day that we finally break the idea of market rent. And I think the role of a property manager should be recognized in rent. I look forward to the day in the future. This is sometime in the future where a renter says, for two identical properties, I'm going to pay more because agency A is going to make this a better living experience than agency B, or even landlord A and landlord B ultimately. And so that's what motivates me, because I think the role of the agency directly affects the experience of being a renter. Therefore, it should be reflected in the fee one way or the other, the rent rather.
Hey there, and welcome to the Property Management Podcast. Thank you so much for having me in your ears. And I don't know about you, but I can still remember the first time I heard someone say AI is going to replace property managers. And honestly, my stomach did drop a little bit. Because if that's true, what was the point of everything I've built and am continuing to build? And what's the point of everything that you're doing right now? But here's the thing I've learned after years of watching this industry change. Technology doesn't wait for you to feel ready, it just moves. And the agencies who are going to win in the next 5 years aren't the ones with the fanciest software. They're the ones who actually understood what was coming and got in front of it instead of getting run over by it. So today I am sitting down with someone who has genuinely helped shape where this industry is heading. Ben White is the co-founder of Ailo, one of the most influential platforms in property management right now. They're also, a full disclosure, a podcast partner, and without them, it would make it very difficult for me to continue sharing this podcast with you. So I am very grateful to have them as one of my podcast partners. But he is also someone who has spent years inside Ray White, building their entire property management franchise from the ground up. This is a guy who's seen the industry from every angle, as a lawyer, as a strategy consultant, as an operator, and now as someone literally building the technology that's going to define what our jobs look like tomorrow. And I'm not going to lie to you. Some of what we talk about today might make you a little uncomfortable. We do go there. Are property managers still going to exist in 10 years? What does AI actually mean for your role, your value, your career? Is robotics coming for this industry? And if so, how soon? And what should you be doing right now, not next year, not eventually, but right now to make sure that you're not left behind? And if you've ever felt that flicker of fear about where all this is going, stay with me, because by the end of this episode, I promise you that fear is going to turn into something a lot more useful, clarity, and maybe even a little bit of excitement about what is actually possible for you in this industry. So grab yourself a cuppa and let's dive on in. Ben, thank you so much for joining me on the Property Management Podcast. We've had a few false starts to get here today. Super grateful to have you here. And for anyone listening who may not know who you are, can you share a little bit about your story?
Sure. I'm one of the co-founders of the property management platform Ailo. Although I have been in the industry now over 20 years, I passed that anniversary last year. I first cut my teeth building out Ray White's property management franchise model. That was 5 to 7, 8 years of that really focused on building out the core offering of what it means to be able to support another business. Really enjoyed that time, very proud of what we built, and then started then looking at how to make an impact in the business beyond just that core offering. And so, of course, technologies inevitably you get to at some point, and that's where the journey is now with Ailo and property management.
You were born into this industry, weren't you? You didn't really have a choice. Or you have been a solicitor and have
Yeah,
been a consultant.
I did a lot of things. So I had not intended to join real estate. I was
Yeah.
living in America. I'd come back and I was looking for a job in Sydney, or places not connected to real estate. And it was one of those things where you're looking for jobs. If it was either stay at home all day in my pajamas playing my Xbox, or go into the city, put on a suit and go in the city and just wait for the phone to ring. So I went into the Ray White head office, sat at one of my brother's desks for days or weeks while I was having interviews. And my father walked past and said, "What are you doing?" And the truth was nothing. And he said, "Come along to a meeting." And it was the guys who were pitching what became Run Property, which is now part of the Little Group.
Yep.
This is in '05, and I went to this meeting and fell absolutely in love with property management. And that ever since that moment, I've been in it. And so that was meant to be I don't even know what it was at the time. I thought maybe a little detour to what I was planning to do, but ended up becoming my profession. And that was how it started for me in a kind of tangible sense. But of course, yeah, mainly growing up, it was all about auctions and sales. We didn't talk a lot about property management around the dinner table, I must admit, at growing up, but that's where I found my calling.
So, what was it about property management you think that attracted you to wanting to, yeah, go down the dark hole or the light hole, whatever way you want to
Yeah,
look at
yeah, yeah.
property management?
I think that any discussion about property management, you need to first answer the question, what is property management? And of course, that sounds ridiculous because I've had this conversation hundreds of times with people. People look at me like I've got something's wrong with me. But I ask the question, what do you think property management is? And most people say property management is some combination of three things, which is collect rent, fix things when they break, and find a tenant. Now, if you ask the average landlord in the street, you ask the average property renter in the street, you ask the average business owner in the street, and so on, that's how people relate to it. And they think of it as a collection of things that do those topics. I fell in love with it because I saw that this is what they were pitching at the time, the run team, was what property management is, in my view, a much better definition of property management is the one place in a real estate agency where customer relationships are built and nurtured. And that's what it is. It's not, of course, one of the services you provide is rent and all those things. But what it actually is, what is property management? It's the one place in this whole industry that relationships are built and nurtures and customer relationships, not just relationships like I've got an email, I've got a database relationship and I send them interesting content, but they're actually customers. And every day they're a customer. I think it's fundamentally different from what sales is, although I've spent in the last 21 years 99.999% of my thinking's on property management, probably more. I know very little about the sales side. I'm vaguely aware the industry exists, but I don't make any comment on it other than what excited me about property management was that idea of building customer relationships with people in the community is limitless. And it's not limited to rent, repairs, and leasing, which is what it was 20 odd years ago and before that. It is anything it needs to be to have a customer relationship. And that's very expansive. It's almost limitless. It's hugely valuable. I think it's an incredibly rewarding career, lots of opportunity to develop, great opportunity for businesses. And I think that's any discussion about property management, whether it's what is it, and I know we're going to talk about AI and all the things. I think it all starts with that question. If you think property management's the narrow definition, it's really hard to see where it goes. If you
Absolutely.
see it in the broader sense, it's about building customer relationship, then it's an infinite possibility and you can become an optimist. And I think if you're narrow, it lends itself to pessimism. It lends itself to narrowness, smallness, limiting yourself. If you see it in the expansive definition, then you open up and it takes a while. But when you see every opportunity in this industry, I look at things like AI and think, oh my God, that's the best thing that's ever happened to property management. Because I can think of all the relationships you can build, the customer relationships you can build, and think of all the value you can create.
It's ironic, though, when you think about technology, though, people are thinking that technology is going to take away all of those relationships.
For sure.
But it's actually not. It's taking away all that menial stuff that we don't have to do anymore so that we can invest in those relationships. And just funnily that you mentioned that the customer and the nurturing of relationships. When I started my agency 15 years ago, very early on, and I think I read a book or I listened to something, and it was people remember, they don't remember what you say to them, but they remember how you make them feel.
Yeah,
And
right.
from there, I built my business based on customer experience. What were they going to experience the first time they met me? What were they going to experience the first time they got an email from? So building that. And from that, your business can not only grow and thrive, but you keep your clients long term, which
Mhm.
ultimately means that your sales team thrives from the potential of event. Yeah. But it's crazy that there is still that mentality that
Yeah.
technology is going to ruin relationships.
I think that's this idea of if you see, I mean, here's the thing I talk about when I speak to people is take the 80% of revenue in property management is the quote unquote rent collection fee, which is what it used to be. Back in the day, collecting rent was a job. You actually employed people, which is why it was you that walked the streets, knocked on the door, and collected rent and issued a receipt out of the bag. That was, and you went to the bank, and then you had to account for it,
How old
and
are
you had to
you?
get the typewriters. You had to get the typewriter out at the end of the month. Was the business shut? That was and that's why you earn 7%. Now the act of collecting and managing money is basically zero in a modern system. That's not true of every system, but in modern systems. So the idea that if you see that 7% as the fee to collect and manage rent, then you look at innovation and think, oh my God, if we automate rent, how do I make a living? If you see it though as building customer relationships, as you say, how does it make you feel? It's, oh my God, if I had this thing taken care of, imagine the opportunity I can create more value for my customers. I can have money dispersed daily. We can do amazing things. And you look at it optimistically, exactly the same set of facts. One person looks at it as a threat and almost an existential risk to their career or their business and revenue. The other person looks at it as the greatest thing that happened to them. And I think that's what makes this industry so exciting is the richness of that discussion. I don't pretend to have every answer, but geez, I enjoy that. I enjoy being part of that game to find the new way because that is it. That's where we're going to look back 10 years from now. And I think the decisions get made today are going to look obvious in 10 years. But when you're in it as a time capsule, it's hard because there's no one knows the right path.
So,
But if you see it broadly, you see the opportunities and you've got to actually think broadly to see it. If you think narrowly, you will never see it. It's impossible.
and is that the ethos that you've used to found Ailo? And what was the moment that you realized that technology was going to be the lever to create this optimism and I guess freedom as well?
Yeah. So I have had two bites of this cherry. The first one failed, and
What was the lesson?
it was a lesson. And I tell you what, I made a category error at the start. And when I first started out in property management, it was very common. I don't hear it as much as I used to, but it used to be. Remember the days when people had probably before your time policy procedures manuals. You actually had the
Yeah,
manuals
no,
on your
I had
desk
one
and
of
those
them.
things.
Spent hours on
And
it. Yep.
yeah, and you'd buy them, and that was my first go at it. We wrote our own policy. I still have it actually. I look at it occasionally and smile. But the theory back then was property management was like a McDonald's. Just follow the bouncing ball and do this stuff. That's what I was taught first. That property management's a process business and so on and so forth. And I took that hook, line, and sinker, and we tried to build software that basically productized this process. Everything was the same. And I didn't, it occurred to me during that, my big failure was understanding later on that it's a total category error to think of property management like a giant process. It is a service-based industry. And of course, there's process in it, but at the heart of it is service. And different people want different things. There's no two repairs that are identical. Different landlords want different communication preferences, have different everything. And you've got to build systems to enable that to be different. But what the founding idea in Ailo was understanding that that in a service-based business, everything's multi-sided. For a property manager to truly win, everyone has to win. The old world, where it was like a McDonald's, was for you to win, someone had to lose. So I used to get up at conferences and say things like, landlord expectations are going up, therefore you have to offer more service. which was non-controversial. And then I'd think, hey, you're gonna do that. Well, the only way you can do that, you're gonna have to work harder. I don't know what else other than sorry, it just sucks a bit more because they want more. And there was no answer to the problem of rising expectations and the consumer needs because there was always win-lose. Or a business owner wants to make more money, so they're just going to have to work their team a bit harder because staff costs are 50% of revenue and all that stuff, which you know. Or I've got to pay them less, or I have more properties by property manager. It was all trade-offs. And I spent years and years, probably 10 years in the world of trade-offs. And the penny dropped for me when realizing actually that if you see it more clearly as a services-based business, then there's opportunity in a true win-win-win, like a triple win. And everything we've learned in Ailo since then has been for anything popular in our platform that works is good for everybody. It's good for the renter and the landlord and the property manager and economically for the business. It just works. Anytime there's a win-lose, we struggle. And it turns out there's lots of wins. There's lots of win-wins, lots. You can transparency when in the way the platform works with transparency, a lot of property managers instinctively think, oh my God, if I'm transparent, what's that going to mean? I don't know if I'm ready for that. But when that does happen, when they go to the other side, they realize that transparency, which is now mutual, benefits everybody. Everything gets easier, and so on. And so everything I've learned in the kind of more recently than the start is if this narrow win-lose, narrow definition of property management, inshallah, my value is being in control, that I think that's a dead end. Anything that's about services, broadening things up, win-win, that's a whole different model. I don't think we're even at the start of that journey. I think that's going to be the next 10 years or 20 years of this industry is that. And that's how it's a very long answer to your question, but that's how we started, was that idea of when it penny dropped, that there are win-win-wins. There's a thing we use a lot called the service profit chain, which is basically in a service industry, how does profit get created? And very simplistically, there's more complicated than this, but if you have a happy team, create happy customers, create happy shareholders in an agency, very simply. And we've operationalized that as much as we can. And it took we were a long way in before we could actually prove that. We started the business and spent an enormous amount of money on the theory. It was some years before we actually could then prove it. So it was very rewarding when we started seeing businesses with happier team satisfaction, lower team churn, lower landlord churn, higher fees, happier landlords, more profitability. All those things can start working virtuously.
So what is now going to happen, and how are things going to shift just in Ailo, and do you think in the industry with the rise of AI?
I think there's going to be two types of AI. The ones we're seeing now is basically people say, as a property manager, I want my job to be easier. And that's the AI you see now. It's designed, the customer is the real estate agent, and it's designed to make their job easier. And that's great. There is a risk, though, is one of the things I ask people is when they say, oh, I have an inspection tool that's amazing. It writes the report for me. And the challenge with that is it's pretty much the same sentence grammatically to say it writes the report instead of me. And when you're doing that, if you think your value is photos and write a report, that narrow definition of property management, you are feeding the beast that's going to eat you, because you think your value is taking photos and saying 3 downlights, 1 broken. And that's where we are today. Property managers' job getting easier. What's coming is the consumer experience is deeper and broader. And that means more value is being created. And that means the property managers in the box seat and the agency to be the person that provides the value. So I think what we do, and I'm sure others are as well, is looking at AI to expand the range of services and the services you offer, as opposed to, which is very customer oriented, as opposed to saying, as a property manager, I want this thing to be done instead of me, which is very limiting. It's great. If I was a property manager, I would absolutely use them. So it's not a critique, but it doesn't go, what's next after that is anxiety and, oh shit, maybe I assume it's a joke, but I've heard someone's working with a robot at the moment to go and like a humanoid robot to go and take the inspections and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I'm not sure.
Do you think that's going to be is that a really unrealistic leap for this industry? Do you see robots fitting into property management? And like, I'm listening to podcasts about this all the time, and people are talking the end of this decade is there's going to be robots everywhere in every industry.
Sure. I don't think though what been an inspection though is more like inspections.
Yep.
A routine inspection is not just the taking of photographs and writing comments. A routine inspection has a lot more to it. It's about going back to the owner and saying, I think this kitchen is maybe a bit dated. It's now, if we can put a kitchen, you know how the math works, kitchen this and that plus that divided by that, and you get a depreciation and a whole bunch of things. Then you've got a discussion about value creating for your client. So if a robot goes and takes the photos, I think it's great. But who's going to have the conversation with the owner about their investment strategy? Are they looking to move back in? Is this an investment? How much is it a cash flow issue, whatever it might be? I think that is still a human. I think the taking of the photograph to me is sure. As you remember during COVID, we had renters taking their own photo.
Yeah.
So I think, and the world didn't end. I think whoever takes the photo is almost valueless, the taking of the photo. We have in our platform every month about 5 million photographs get taken every month through our platform. And it's an abundance of photos. You know what, there's something going inspections 2 or 3,000 photographs of everything. I don't think that's value creative.
No, I wonder how many conversations are being generated as a result of those photographs that are being taken.
Yeah. And I don't see that as being the idea that an AI can have those conversations. I don't think that's the right way to think about what AI is. I think there's a lot more judgment involved in that. I think there's a lot more skill. I think what people want, I think that one of the great value we have as an industry is that we have local presence, we have expertise, much more than you can get virtually. And so I think there's a lot of strengths. If you had to pick an industry that's going to go well in AI, I reckon property management is on that list.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't put on that list doctors or radiologists and so on, which are very heuristics based.
Or lawyers.
And I think lawyers, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And insert joke, lawyer joke. I can say that as an ex-lawyer.
Yeah.
So I'm an optimist.
Yeah.
I think I think the job will change. I think the job's going to be better. I think the job's going to be much more rewarding. So I think it's all positive. I see it as positive. I'm not sure there's going to be necessarily the same exact number of people in it, but I don't think it's a mass exodus. I think it's maybe the type of people attracted to it might change. But I don't see any. I'm an optimist on that. If you got a time machine 20 years, I believe there'll still be an agency on the street corner and they'll be helping people manage their investment, managing their home and all sorts of things. I think that's real.
This episode is proudly supported by Ailo. And if you've been listening to the show for a while, you've probably noticed what I've noticed. The property managers doing the most interesting work right now keep mentioning the same platform. And I saw it close up at the Harcourt Solutions study tour in Brisbane. The way teams talk about their day has changed. And if you want to hear it for yourself, Ailo hosts after-hours intimate events at Mecca stores across Australia, where you can listen to property managers share their own story. So book a demo at ailo.io, that's AILO.io, and Ailo will send you a Mecca gift card to say thanks. Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question and I think a lot of people are starting to ask this, is there going to be a property management job that still exists in 10 years' time? And I actually asked my AI, I asked it that question before I jumped on with the call today, and it said that property managers will exist, but I will replace the property managers who aren't using AI. So
for sure.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that when I speak to regulators, one of my topics at the moment is it's so much discussion around property management talks about the rules as set rules, like they're the rules of Scrabble. If you and I wanted to play Scrabble, we have to agree the rules and that's it. In property management, I think a better way to see regulation is the minimum standard. These are the minimums. There's an enormous opportunity to go beyond that and provide services well beyond the minimum, whether even to renters. Renters can be customers of an agency.
Absolutely.
Just as much as a landlord. But so much of the discussion is if you limit which I guess is my broad theme, probably repeating it too much. But when you limit it to things like the law says you can only do this, it doesn't say that. It says you must do at least this. And I think regulators and the regulation more broadly, I'd like to see more discussion on giving people the freedom to go beyond the standards. And
So you
so,
are you talking about regulation in terms of AI regulation
no,
for our industry?
regulation is the of our
Uh,
industry. So, for
yeah.
example, there's a lot of regulation on managing tech repairs and maintenance. One thing we've experimented with, but it turns out is not legally possible today to do, is for it's entirely possible for a landlord to say, in the same way you go to a hotel, if you think about two properties managed by two different real estate agencies with two different landlords, today there's a general belief that there's a market price for that property. They should be identical. They're identical properties, they should have the same price. I don't believe that's true for rental. For buying, I get because you've bought it and you now own it. But renting is a service. It's ongoing. So if I'm a renter and I were to know that that property manager is very responsive and that property manager is not very responsive, then I would pay more happily for the responsive property manager. And so the idea there's market rent, I'm not even sure I believe that idea that there's a market rent. There's a service being offered in the same way if I go to a W hotel versus a Holiday Inn, not that I'm a hotel expert, but I would expect, and someone might say, there's a bed's a bed. What's the market rent for a bed? So no, there's a service involved. And that's what I'd like to see. I've say sometimes internally, the day I give this up and retire is the day that we finally break the idea of market rent. And I think the role of a property manager should be recognized in rent. I look forward to the day in the future. This is sometime in the future where a renter says, for two identical properties, I'm going to pay more because agency A is going to make this a better living experience than agency B, or even landlord A and landlord B ultimately. And so that's what motivates me because I think the role of the agency directly affects the experience of being a renter. Therefore, it should be reflected in the fee one way or the other, the rent rather. And I'd like to see that. I haven't seen it yet, but that motivates me enormously. I think it should reward, and I think in turn, the best agency should be charging much more because they're earning a higher rent and so on and so forth. I think that's the future, outperforming market rent. I think that's what a good agency does. We just don't talk about it. And I think a good landlord should also be rewarded for being a good landlord. And I think there's a lot of tenants that would pay more than quote unquote market rent for a great service. The
Yeah.
law doesn't really allow that though today because it's so focused on the minimums, the minimum standards, rather than allowing people to maximize the experience going forward.
Absolutely. And the theme I'm picking up at the moment is how much you value property managers and business and property management businesses, but how little we actually value the job that we are doing and the service we are providing. Sorry, not a job, the service that we are providing for people. We're not thinking broad or big enough about what we do, the impact that we can create. So yeah, I think anyone listening today, I think if you take one thing away is that step up, elevate your service, elevate your value. And I guess if a business owner is listening or a property manager listening today, what would you say to them and to focus on in this new world or the AI world that we're heading down very quickly? We're in, but it's getting quicker and quicker. Yeah, what would you say to them?
I would encourage people to have an open mind on the future as being broader than it is today. You can't see the future or that I believe is going to happen. You can't see it. It's impossible to see if you believe in the narrow definition. What I'm saying probably sounds like ridiculous. So you're not going to see it. A precondition to seeing it is being open to it and believing and saying, just let me stew on that for a moment. Is it possible my business could offer a more broader service? If you don't believe that, then I don't know what, I guess that's the end of the conversation. But if you think you're limited by the past, then the past is gone and it's not coming back. There is a future I think you can get excited by, but you've got to be prepared to be excited by it. I think a lot of people, I'd encourage you to look at some of your work practices and see them as ceilings. Things might work today, but they operate as a ceiling to what you can become. So I don't think you should change because today's broken. I think you should change because today is not going to get you to tomorrow. So it's not broken per se. I'm not saying that your business is failing. You could have a very successful business or a career, but there's a much better one. And a lot of the practices today operate to limit you. You're limited by. I can't do that because that's a good idea, but we can't do that because of something we've done. You've got to get past that. And after that, I just think I'm as much an optimist as I was 21 years ago, and probably more so because now it's back then it was theory. Now I think it's being proven.
So, what are some
So
of you're talking about? You can't see the vision, like it's impossible to see that. But what are you thinking, seeing? And I'm sure when you started Ailo and it was just that little seed of an idea, and what you started with is certainly not what you've finished with now. It's so much bigger, I imagine. Is that how you're seeing this AI future as well, and or robotics and AI? Is that, and if you can share like what you foresee as
yeah, I
your crystal
think
ball?
I think you start with the premise of everyone has a home one way or the other, and a lot of people have an investment, and there's a basically a real estate agency has a trade area. That is your market. Everyone in that market is a potential customer. Landlord, renter, owner, occupier, trades, everybody of your business. And if you see property management as the place that you are going to offer services and create customers out of your marketplace, then that's the first step to seeing what property management is, in my view. It's the place you're going to create customers out of everyone in your marketplace, whoever they are. Get out of this mindset. Like there's a whole bunch of things people say, I can't offer renters a service. And you say, why not? They go, but they're renters. Yeah, but they're in your community. Why can't you offer them a service? And you go through it, but it takes a while. People think, what is it? Is there a management agreement? Just park all of that. How can you make a customer out of a renter? And you go through it. 10 minutes later, they're on the other side. It's not hard, but it's just we've been beaten in. Property management is a management agreement, a tenancy agreement. If those two things exist, then it's not property management. And so having that, just allowing the conversation to be had, and it happens. People go through this mind shift and it drops and they're like, I get it now. And it can happen in 1 minute, 10 minutes. Sometimes I've been talking to some people 20 years and we haven't seen eye to eye. So it's not inevitable, but I think you got to open your mind to almost like a mantra. You just got to let it go into your mind and sit there for a bit. And I think that's when you see that of what it can be, you'll see it as much bigger than we have said it is. We've limited ourselves to 7% of rent. And there's no rule anywhere that says that's what property management is. There's no rule that says you can't offer mortgages. How many people are really talking to their renters about mortgages? Or their landlords about mortgages? Or their landlords about their second property? Honestly, having conversations,
No,
not many. And banks pay amazingly. A bank will pay you more money for a successful mortgage introduction than your landlord will pay you to manage their property for a year. Just is. That's just how the economy works. And if you see your job as being helping a landlord manage their investment, then of course you got to talk about the mortgage. Today, a lot of property managers say, why would I talk about their mortgage? It's not rent and it's not a repair and it's not leasing. And if you got to get them to think, no, you're in the business of creating customers and servicing them. And maybe they don't have to be. I'm not saying every property manager needs to be able to talk about mortgage broking, but you got to know how to introduce a mortgage broker. You got to understand how important it is and the role it plays. And if you can't, I think that's what the future is going to be. Those conversations is understanding that, and technology plays an enormous part in this. Technology is going to have to respect everyone's preferences. The classic example of one landlord, you got two landlords, and one landlord says, tell me everything. That's why I pay you all this money, because I want you to tell me everything. And everything else is approved. You got another landlord that says, uh, I pay you all this money to not bother me. Don't call me unless there's a war. I remember my very first property management conference I went to ever 21 years ago. I remember I was sitting at the back of the room learning, and I was sitting there just learning this industry. And someone got up and gave that example. And she said, I wish landlords would just make up their mind. And I remember thinking, but they have made up their mind and they've told you one wants it this way and one wants it this way. They've told you, you just haven't listened because this person wanted everyone to say the same thing. So their solution was you just play in the middle. You tell them some stuff and not other stuff. And therefore you've made everyone unhappy. How does businesses like ours, which I think is the obligation on people like us, is to give a property manager the tools to be outstanding. And outstanding is that system that should be worked through. And computers have a lot of role to play, businesses like ours. I think the industry generally has asked too little of their technology providers in the past, which is a whole other discussion. But I think that's the era of seeing a software company as a supplier. We often get put in the discuss as a supplier to a business. I much would rather be seen as a partner because what's coming next, when you choose technology partners, you should be treating it as a partnership, not a supplier relationship. I don't think those days I don't think are here anymore.
So there's lots of technology out there. Just on that topic, there is lots of technology partners out there, and there is technology for your maintenance, there's technology for your
Yep.
inspections, trust accounting. What advice would you give to someone who is overwhelmed with all of those options out there? What advice would you give them in terms of narrowing down what they really need?
I think you've got to, and this is harder, this is hard, but I think if I was knowing what I now know, if I was on the other side of the table, I would ask questions not about the features. I would ask two broad questions. One is, how much has this thing changed over the last, say, 12 months? And you can measure technology by its pace of change. If something hasn't changed in a year, it's very unlikely they're going to change a year from now. And there's reasons for technologically they've ended up in a cul-de-sac, which makes any change exponentially expensive.
Gotcha.
If they've changed a lot, just the pace of change is high, it usually means the architectures of the system is very good. Usually, there's always exceptions. But I would ask a set of questions around, show me where I was a year ago. And that's a big part of the stuff. The other was I'd be asking questions about what the mentality of that business is. Where is the future? How do you see value created? What's your vision for the industry? And I sometimes get asked questions. Are we profitable? Are we going to be here a year from now? Who's our shareholders? What's my exit plan? I think that's a totally legitimate question to ask a partner. If we were a supplier, I'd say it's none of your business. As a partner, I think, sure, I should answer those questions. And I've answered them. Some people like the answer, some people didn't like the answer. But I'm glad they made their decision based on, I think, the right kind of questions, which is where's this thing going? Technology is in flight. You measure it by its pace of change, which is the first bucket, and the other is where it's going. You need to know how quickly it's changing and where it's changing to, much more than show me how you do an inspection today and show me this or what a statement looks like. Because a platform that's evolving will get to the right spot, assuming you agree with where it's going. If someone were to hear this, what I said, and said, I don't agree with things I've said, then I'm sure Ailo is probably not for you. And that's okay. But you would make an informed decision, say, I don't agree with that philosophy, because that philosophy I've got is embedded increasingly in the platform. And that's the whole point of why we're doing it.
So how quickly is it changing now? Like how quickly is technology changing? Is it from when you started Ailo to now? What is the rate of change?
You measure rate of change in how things get released. We do a minor release every week and a major one every 2 weeks. So we have a lot of change. In fact, one of the biggest challenges we have, which we struggle with, is the amount of change and how do we communicate that to our users. But there's a deeper change going on around how data is used and how data is used, particularly for agentic AI and a whole bunch of stuff that comes in. There's business model questions around, there are some businesses that are built on, I'm going to take this data and sell it to another person or commercialize it another way. So understanding the business's business model, is that aligned to yours, is a big one. But the big trends now in technology is the shift towards being much more aligned to your business and what you're trying to achieve, as opposed to trying to sell you a bunch of seats and you got 10 property managers who want to charge you 10 times $1,000 a month or whatever it is. And that's what it is as software. You don't buy software anymore. You partner with technology companies. And that changes so many things culturally. It realigns us to the role of a business. So we have to keep investing in the core platform, even without raising fees, because we're aligned to our customers' interests. AI, of course, is going to challenge every preconceived idea of where the technology partner starts and ends and where the agency starts and ends is going to be a lot more blurred than in the past. In the past, it was, here's a piece of software. The extreme example is, I don't know, Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word sells a word processor. What you type in Microsoft is completely irrelevant to Microsoft. They don't care. You can do anything you want on it. Use it, not use it. type something good, type something bad. That's old world software. And those companies are those kind of legacy ideas of it's your business, not ours, and we're just going to sell you a piece of software. Today, it's much more aligned and we have a lot more overlapping interests. The success of an agency becomes important. What's important to an agency? It's customer satisfaction, it's CSAT between the agency and the landlord becomes important to us because that's how our business models align to that. Where does it end and where's it start? We've got something I was looking at this morning. We've got in our platform a workflow management tool that manages the work. Property managers can go in and shift due dates. Now, there's a very small number of property managers that shift dates so regularly that they're never behind. And it looks like on the basic reports that everything's fine. But they're what we call time shifters. Every night they go in and shift everything out a week so that they never have any overdue tasks. And we're
And your
just
data reports all that too, doesn't it? Your
everything
data.
comes out. So
Yeah.
we're just producing some dashboards now on this. And we're trying to work out
I like that. Time
who do we
shifters.
tell? So do we tell the
Yes.
business owner first? And one thing we're debating is, should we tell the property manager first, hey, look, you're a time shifter. If you don't, we'll give you a chance. And if not, we're going to report you to your boss at some point. Or do we just give it straight? What's the role, how it is? Now, I fully respect it's not our business. It's the agencies. But when transparency comes, you can measure everything. It is an interesting question on what is our role as a partner. Clearly, it's with the business owner, but can we take some weight off him or her by helping with performance management?
I would
I
say
don't know.
yes. Yeah, I think there's a lot of business owners that need that. They
Yeah.
need that transparency that there's been for far too long that culture of hiding things and sweeping things. And it's not until somebody leaves an agency that the shit hits a fan and there's the
That's right.
driving. Yeah. So that,
And it doesn't, and it helps everyone. And so the best people, the same tool allows the best people to be recognized and rewarded. And so it's the same algorithm that works out time shifters, the same one that shows who aren't time shifters and who are amazing. And so you can solve a lot of win-wins through this by saying the same tool rewards the good ones, gives the business owners maybe a chance to help the people that aren't going well and give them. And that's what you do when you start getting invested in the outcome. Old software it's not our job, it's a tool. That's their business. It's not our business. And you talk to even some of the VC people who we've talked to and never successfully raised money from, I should say. But a lot of they look at this and say, no, you'll just be a software company. Don't get involved because it's too costly. And they like the software world wants you to not be anything other than software. I don't think that's the future, personally.
I don't think so either. And I have tried lots of different technology and software over the years, and I have always felt like I was just a number. There was no relationship building. We talk about relationships and nurturing. There is certainly none of that in the tech space that I have experienced. So yeah, I think there definitely is a shift that is needed for this. And I'm assuming that's part of your Ailo ethos as well.
That's right. That's the guiding principle. It's something we strive towards. I don't pretend to be perfect, but that's something that's what we're about. Imperfect as we are, but that's the goal. And so we have a lot more to do. That's very motivating. I get so much energy out of being in a business and the energy of people having a go, building their careers, a tough job, as you said earlier. I think you got to love it to be part of it. One thing I'm surprised by is how many people who are associated with this industry that hate it. And I think unless you love it, you can't see the future if you hate it. It's like a precondition to seeing it. And you got to love it. You've even got to love it to hate it properly. Even the bits you don't like, you've got to start with the loving it to see that. Otherwise, you're just on the outside, just throwing rocks.
So if you could give one piece of advice to a PM who wants to future-proof their career or a business owner who wants to future-proof their business, what would that be?
I think try and identify all the preconceived notions you have about what your job is and work on ways to start disproving them. You've probably been told a lot of things that aren't true. And it's not always the case, but probably. If you're not getting that out of the business you're in, there are some wonderful leaders in this industry, remarkable leaders in this industry. I won't name names, but just because I'm sure that's not what you want to do, but find one. And if you're not getting the leadership you want, life's too short to not get it. Go and work for some of those people.
Absolutely. And I guess life's too short now not to embrace how AI is going to make your life easier and
There's so
elevate
much you
you.
can do. So much you can, and as you know with AI, you just got to try it and try some stuff, and you'll learn how it works. It's not that scary. I have ideas. Go out to your technology partners or suppliers and raise them. Hey, have you thought about this? What about that? Ask for more. We're all in this together now, and the more ideas, the better. And if
And
you're not
that's,
getting what you need, change to people that are.
and that's a good point, actually. If you've got those ideas and you're not sure how to create it yourself, and you've got a technology partner or a software partner, yeah, have conversations with them. How do we make this happen? I know you, at Ailo, that you guys do work really closely with your partners to bring those ideas to life, which is why you're changing everything's, your
Yeah.
updates are happening so frequently.
It's all good ideas come ultimately from someone on the front line who sees something and says this doesn't have to be this way. And you got to hold on. I think we've trained property managers for too long for a whole bunch of reasons to just take what they've got and just take it. I reckon that's, if one cultural shift in this whole industry would be to be a bit more demanding, a bit more agitating for what you need. It can be uncomfortable for everyone, but I'm an absolute believer fundamentally that feedback from a customer is a gift. Whether you choose to do something with it or not, it's up to each person. But if someone takes the time to say, I think you can be better, I think it honors us to be asked to be better. Nothing makes me sadder than going to a customer and say, yeah, it's pretty good. What can we do? Nothing. That really actually upsets me because I don't think we have the right relationship. I think I like customers demanding more of us because they see what we can become and they see our potential and they want us to be it. So they come back and say, they want us to do hard things, which is great. Otherwise, what's the point? You just sit and you just have okay customers that don't leave. That's terrible. It's the beginning of the end, if that's where it's all going. And there's no future for that for anybody, for that matter.
Yeah, I'll send you through my big list after this
Fantastic.
session today.
Yeah, good.
Ben, thank you so much. I could chew your brain for hours and hours, but I am conscious of your time. To wrap up the podcast, I usually ask our guests to share a personal development tool, resource, book. What is something that you could share with our audience?
I am a lot at the moment. I'm vibe coding a lot of things that I've had in my head to try and help get out, to help me with my own thinking about some ideas I have. One of the things I'd recommend is get into whatever your favorite tool is and try and just build something. So if you've got an idea for a repair app or whatever it might be, it sounds ridiculous, but go and try and build one. Now, the vibe coding thing you can't commercialize a vibe coder depending who you are and so on. So not to use, but to help you understand what you're thinking. And I think you help visualize things. I think it's a great medium. I got one from a client 2 nights ago, sent me some stuff. I do it a lot internally. And I think it helps you know what's possible. It helps your own mind. It helps you have more ambition in what you want to do. So that would be my tip, is go and build something. Just build it and share it.
Amazing. Ben, thank you so much for your time. I'm super grateful. And thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks, Kai.
Can I ask you a quick favour before you leave this episode? Now, we all know how important reviews are for businesses these days, and mine is no different. If you could spare just a minute to follow, rate and review this podcast, it would mean a lot to me. In fact, what would get me super excited is if you share this podcast with someone in the industry who you think might need to hear some of the episodes right now. And if you'd like to find out more about working with me or any of the products I have to help you start, grow or scale your property management business, head to my website, thatpropertymum.com.au, or check out the links in the show notes.